All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Michael Schur. I am sitting in for Mark, doing this with Kim and Tony today. Kim all week, and we have, I'm coming to you, as you probably know, from Los Angeles, California, and it has been quite a time. I don't need to tell any of you. There is a sort of sense, a kind of a calm before the storm sense that we have here now. The winds are expected to pick up. There have been brush fires as far north as Ventura County. These big fires that we're familiar with now, their containment is not where it needs to be yet. Right now, the Palisades fire, and this is as of about a half hour ago, 17% contained. The Eaton fire, 35% contained. Kenneth fire, you'll recall, 100%. Hearst fire, 97%. And the Auto fire, which is the one in Ventura County that sparked last night, is nearly 60% contained. It was contained only to brush and not to structures. And that's what the fire lines are, where they set these up. But the big fear is a fear we had a week ago today, which is that winds are coming in and winds lift embers and they take them to places that are not ordinarily fire hazard type places. So evacuation orders remain, evacuation warnings remain. Fortunately, I'm in neither position where I am, but that could change, as we know, at the drop of a hat, as it did for so many people that I know last week. People who lost their homes, people who were evacuated, people who lost power, people who have not been able to go back to their homes. So there's this kind of, I guess they call it a calm before the storm for a reason. That's what it feels like now. Everybody's kind of waiting to see what happens with these winds. But there's also a sense that we are now in a position to be more prepared for it because of the number of firefighters that are here in Los Angeles and County now from all over the country, really, but certainly from all over the state. Fire trucks lined up in zones where there could be danger. And water trucks at the ready, and helicopters going to be flying until they're unable to fly because of the wind and drop the fire retardant and the water. So it's not like it was a week ago in terms of just being caught by surprise. Even if this happens, and I think the devastation will be limited because of the preparation that exists now, because of what we know happened last week. So we'll continue to talk about the fires. We'll talk about how they play into politics a little bit. I know that you all talked about it a lot yesterday, but we have a show that is, that's pretty full today too, to talk about what's happening in politics. This is the final week, as we all know, of the Biden administration. When we sign off on Friday and Mark picks up on Monday, he'll be picking the show up at a time where we have a new president. And I think that everything that is going on in our midst right now with the fires and with the politics, and everybody's tuning into something right now. We have a lot on that. We also have a poll related to that, because Pete Hegseth, who is the nominee for Secretary of Defense by the incoming president, is enjoying his first hearing today on Capitol Hill, his confirmation hearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee, chaired by Roger Wicker, the Republican from Tennessee. The ranking member is Jack Reed, the Republican from and military veteran from Rhode Island. We'll have a lot about that, but we have a community poll on the Mark Thompson Show. We'd love to have your participation. A simple question: will Pete Hegseth be confirmed as the head of the Department of Defense? So Kim, they go in, they know how to vote in this poll. It's right there.
Right there at the top of the chat. Absolutely. And we've got a preliminary result. How many people have voted so far, Tony?
About 100, but this is in the community tab. It's not in the show chat tab. It's going to be on the community tab on the YouTube page and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
It's so we can leave it up after the show is actually done, or else it would be.
And of course,
when the show, yeah. So it's in the community tab.
This is not a scientific poll. Many members of the Hegseth family could be watching the Mark Thompson show and going in and voting for the fact that he'll be confirmed. And so have to mention it's not scientific, but it does get you a sense of where the Mark Thompson show audience is and what people are thinking, because it's not just our opinion. It's how we glean it from what we've been taking in from the news and people we speak to at work, at home, et cetera, listening to on podcasts. So please go in and vote. Let us know what you think in regards to Pete Hegseth and what his chances are. And
we have a bunch of dreamers so far. 74 to 26% say no, he will not be confirmed. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that optimism is a good thing. In general, but I think optimists, the nature of being optimistic is that you get disappointed on occasion. And if you're optimistic that he's not going to be confirmed, that's great. And maybe you won't be. We'll talk a little bit now about Pete Hegseth and what he's up against and what he's facing today in these hearings and the way it works. I mean, the Thompson audience is a smart audience. They know how this works. But for people who are new to the process and new to what happens, every nominee for a cabinet position goes before the appropriate committee in the Senate to gain confirmation from that committee. And the committee is there to recommend to the full Senate what their findings are on it. The Senate is now 53-47 Republicans to Democrats. So there would need to be almost a movement of Republicans away from a nominee in order to upend that. And one of the people, has people have thought, maybe it's not going to go his way with Pete Hegseth. There are others too. You'll also recall that Matt Gaetz didn't even make it to this nomination. He had to withdraw his name after there was a lot of controversy with his being named Attorney General nominee or designee. And so the process plays out. There's a lot of grandstanding by senators, but there's also a lot of highlighting what is important. From the very first thing that Hegseth said today, he talked about his Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, which is to me.
Sorry for laughing.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting opening. You're going to be the Secretary of Defense, and that this is a separation of church and state. I mean, right in front of us, and that's what he opens with. And then it comes back to another senator who commended him for having opened with that. So there is this sense that there's a fundamentalism about the way that people believe, both in their church and in their home, and that the church can absolve you of every sin you've ever committed. Well, I think, Tony, we should open up with talking about some of those sins. Tim Kaine, the senior senator from Virginia, you'll remember he was a former vice presidential nominee, got into some of the questioning about the knocks against Pete Hegseth and why he is a flawed nominee in the eyes of many. Most of it having to do with alcohol, with abuse of women, both sexually and otherwise, by misogyny or chauvinism at the very least when it comes to women serving in the military, the accusations of infidelity.
We're having
we're
having a little bit of problems with crackling with your audio. Is it just me, Tony?
No,
or is he cutting out?
He's getting a little bit of filtering, like a little bit of slowdown, but it's
okay.
Here, I can tweak it. Let's see if this helps.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah,
Carry on, Michael. Sure, we just want to make sure everyone can hear your beautiful voice.
Hold on, there he is. We're good.
Are we? We're
good. Yeah, okay. I can hear your room, so we're good.
We're good. All right, great.
Sorry,
Sexual
assault, so there you go.
Well, I mean, but you can't stop there. There are all both as a commentator and some of the things he said, both about the Confederacy, about women in the military. And the women in the military stuff was thought to be something that would be a difficult hurdle for him to get over. And he is a veteran. He served, apparently nobly in that job, but it's things in his private life and things he has said in his public life that have given a lot of people pause. And we'll get into that. But let's get to Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia, whose questioning went into some of these accusations. We should say there was an accusation of sexual assault in 2017 against a woman with whom he settled. It was not just sexual assault that he was accused. It was actually, I believe, rape and potentially drugging a woman at a political convention in 2017. The day after that alleged rape, the woman went to an emergency room, gave for a rape kit collection. A nurse reported, as they are bound to do, the rape to police. No charges were filed, we should point out, but Hegseth did settle with women. And the police released a report from that incident, and it was fairly graphic. And they released that in November after Hegseth's name came up. And one of the senators, Republican senators, who read that report, and because everybody becomes tribal at a certain point, said that it was just two people flirting with each other, which do with that what you will. And so let's hear Tim Kaine now talk a little bit about, or ask Hegseth a little bit about some of his behavior in general and what that says about him.
I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime? That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? Senator, how is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges. Well, no, fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything?
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
how do you explain your judgment?
Completely false charges against me. You fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault,
you've admitted you're a lying scumbag.
To be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So you're
talking about a hypothetical.
So you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge,
but you
acknowledge that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that
too
in
hard
each
to
of your
admit,
weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, I'm not a perfect person, not claiming to be.
But no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But
Yeah,
if there
don't
were,
wanna
you
do
would
that.
agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my
I'm innocent.
responsibility.
Did
But
you
I don't
ever
wanna hear
engage
for
in
them.
any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And
That's
ultimately,
it.
Your attorney,
Sticking to it.
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us. And I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
You won't even answer the questions. How is he an open book?
Confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Concerned Veterans for America and the executive director of Vets for Freedom.
Were you fired from either of them?
And I was never fired from a veterans organization.
Do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
they're not anonymous.
The letters on the record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record,
we've seen records with names attached to them.
Vets for Freedom, Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News attributing to me working hard every day on behalf.
One of your colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you denied these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous. And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman,
attitudes,
I think he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements.
He's way over his time.
I now yield.
Wow.
So he came the hardest at Hegseth about the things that everyone on the other side is overlooking, and that Hegseth himself, in the next questioning, talked about how God and Jesus are the most important, parts of that. He was questioned by Kevin Kramer from North Dakota about the fact that he has a tattoo of the Jerusalem cross over his right chest, and that is somehow indicating that he has found forgiveness from God for everything that he had done wrong, and arguing with these hypotheticals. Now, this was a setup by Cain, of course, in saying all of these things, would they be disqualifying? Because the Democrats on that committee and the Republicans themselves also know that these things are true, that they're real, that there is not anonymity to some of these allegations. And even though Hegseth said those are anonymous reports, the committee has the names of the people. They're not saying them in public forum, as they shouldn't, because there are NDAs and that sort of thing. But this is a Secretary of Defense job, and I think that's a big part of why there are questions about Hegseth. And again, you're fighting uphill because of 53-47. And Kim, Tony, I'm just asking this as an aside: is the sound any better than it was a little bit ago?
So
Way
much
better.
better.
Okay.
So much better.
Good.
Mhm.
Good. So sorry about that. However, we did it, we fixed it, and I will
Nice.
never be able to explain why it's better.
Internet does internet things.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. When I call my mother and I'm on the phone with my mother, and the phone call drops, I know the next question when my mother calls back: what happened? And
Mhm.
she's asked that question forever, and no one has ever had the answer for what happened. And she will ask it forever, and I'll make fun of it. And so I'll pick up the phone when she calls back, and I'll say, I don't know what happened, Mom. I have no idea. It's nobody's fault. I didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. It's fine. There's nothing to fix. But anyway, going back to this and away from my mother, and reminder, there is a poll on the page that we want you to participate in, the Will Pete Hegseth Be Confirmed poll. What your feelings are about that, not scientific, but a sense of the audience and what they think about his prospects here. One of the reasons to think that he will not be confirmed for the office is the fact that there are women in the Republican conference more than there have been before in the Republican caucus of the U.S. Senate. One of them, Joni Ernst of Iowa, who spoke out against Hegseth after he was named and was then upbraided by the Trump people, saying she will be primaried if she votes against Hegseth. This is a decorated veteran of the armed forces who served in Iraq and Kuwait, who, whatever you may think of her politics, on the military side, has given the sacrifice that people who do that sort of thing give, and is someone who should be listened to, and someone, as a woman in the armed forces, who should stand up, one would think, to someone who does not think women should be in the armed forces, and when they're not in the armed forces, does clearly not see them as equal because of his record of abuse. He ran an office, and he took everyone in the office to a strip club and was buying dances for people and dances himself. This is somebody who has degraded women multiple times across his life. Should he be forgiven? I don't know. It's up to the women, and if he didn't break the law, then it's up to the women, I guess, alone. But the point is, should he be Secretary of Defense, not whether or not he should be able to join a club or go make a reservation at a restaurant. And Pete Hegseth is saying that he should be, that he's qualified for this. Joni Ernst is the person you would think she's going to stand in the way. She talked about it, but then all of a sudden, threats of a primary, and what could be more important than holding my seat and not getting primaried is much more important, obviously, than who will be the Secretary of Defense of the United States. And so Joni Ernst opens her questioning talking about government audits, and then gets into a conversation about women, and sort of highlighting some of the things that the two of them talked about. As part of this process, many of these nominees go and meet with just about every senator and have conversations with them. Hegseth, of course, went to Ernst because she was outspoken from the get-go. I don't know if you've entered your poll already, but your poll opinion, if you voted in the poll. But if you don't have Joni Ernst, then it's looking good for Pete Hegseth. If Joni Ernst is not on the anti-Hegseth vote, then it's going to be very difficult to see him not get confirmed. Listen to Iowa's junior Senator Joni Ernst.
Okay, moving on to women in combat, and I had the privilege of serving in uniform for over 23 years between our Army Reserves and our Iowa Army National Guard. Did serve in Kuwait and missions in Iraq. And so it is incredibly important that I stress, and I hope that if confirmed, you continue to stress, that every man and woman has opportunity to serve their country in uniform and do so at any level as long as they are meeting the standards that are set forward. And we talked about that in my office. I do believe in high standards. Now, I was denied the opportunity to serve in any combat role because I have a lot of gray hair. And the policy has changed since then, okay? So I've been around for quite a while. But for the young women that are out there now and can meet those standards, and again, I'll emphasize they should be very, very high standards. They must physically be able to achieve those standards so that they can complete their mission. But I want to know, again, let's make it very clear for everyone here today. As Secretary of Defense, will you support women continuing to have the opportunity to serve in combat roles?
Senator, first of all, thank you for your service, as we discussed extensively as well.
It's my privilege.
And my answer is yes, exactly the way that you caveated it. Yes, women will have access to ground combat roles, given the standards remain high, and we'll have a review to ensure the standards have not been eroded. In any one of these cases. That'll be part of one of the first things we do at the Pentagon is reviewing that in a gender-neutral way, the standards, ensuring readiness and meritocracy is front and center. But absolutely, it would be the privilege of a lifetime if confirmed, to be the Secretary of Defense for all men and women in uniform who fight so heroic. They have so many other options. They decide to put their right hand up for our country. And it would be an honor to have a chance to lead them.
Thank you. And just very briefly, we only have less than a minute left, but we have also discussed this in my office. A priority of mine has been combating sexual assault in the military and making sure that all of our service members are treated with dignity and respect. This has been so important. Senator Gillibrand and I have worked on this, and we were able to get changes made to the Uniform Code of Military Justice to make sure that we have improvements and on how we address the tragic and life-altering issues of rape, sexual assault. It will demand time and attention from the Pentagon under your watch if you are confirmed. So as Secretary of Defense, will you appoint a senior level official dedicated to sexual assault prevention and response?
Senator, as we have discussed, yes, I will.
Okay, and my time has expired. Thank you.
So he's giving assurances to Joni Ernst, who Kim is likely the only vote against Hegseth that would force or bring other people across that line.
She's a sellout. She's a sellout. Is she not a victim of sexual assault?
We don't know. She's divorced. I don't know.
I thought that was a publicly part of her history.
I think it may be. I just don't recall her.
Yeah.
Her history.
And so here's a woman who has likely a history of this, who served in the military, who's looking at a guy who is obviously not qualified, not answering the questions, has all kinds of skeletons rattling around in his closet. And she goes easy on him. I think she went easy on him because it was less than a year ago that Hegseth was on TV talking about how women should not be serving in combat roles in the military. And now all of a sudden he's changed his mind. What happened? Did God swoop down and give him that as well? Come on.
Yeah, it's incredible. And yes, I do recall, I don't know the details of sexual assault against Senator Ernst, but I do, as you said, it was part of her public record. I do recall that. I just don't recall the details of it. And I don't recall whether she made that a campaign thing or if it came up during the Kavanaugh hearings. So so I would say that yes, she was. And again, Senator Jeff Bingaman, a former senator from New Mexico, once said to me when I was covering a confirmation hearing, I don't even recall who it was for. I suspect it was for whoever the Secretary of Defense was to be. He said, generally speaking, the public should never have heard of who the Secretary of Defense nominee is. This is should not be. And he wasn't saying that should be a rule, but he basically saying that as soon as you know too much about them, then that means there's too much to know about them. And that's not the kind of person that should be in the role. And we know that Pete Hegseth, like Donald Trump, whatever his qualifications are or are not, had some degree of celebrity and is marketing off of that celebrity as a spokesperson on TV, as a objectively handsome guy who spoke about the military and his experience and was a talking head on a lot of conservative media. And so how he got to this position that's part of it. And there are people who are clearly more qualified than Pete Hegseth, and not even just because Donald Trump named him. I mean, Donald Trump could have named many people to be Secretary of Defense, but there's a kind of, an allure that Donald Trump likes. He likes people who are, powerful, handsome, loyal, all of that.
Loyal to him, not loyal to the United States of
Correct,
America.
loyal to him. And look, I mean, as Tim Kaine was saying, he wasn't a loyal husband, which does not disqualify him from, it maybe disqualifies him from marrying the next woman he meets, who knows that, but it doesn't disqualify him from higher office. Kaine did ask him, I think it was Kaine who was asking him, yes, it was, who was asking him if when he took his vows, if he broke his vows, like, he's about to take an oath if he's going to be Secretary of Defense. So there is a lot of inconsistency in it, but this is what you get. Donald Trump won. And these are the kind of nominees that are going to be marched before the committees in different ways at different times in this process. And Pete Hegseth, if he's confirmed, does it mean that others aren't going to be confirmed? No, they go one by one, and different committees take this up. So the Armed Services Committee and Tim Kaine and Joni Ernst and Roger Wicker and the people we're hearing from today will most likely not be on the committee that's going to vet the next person, for example, Secretary of State. So I think that that we're seeing the process play out, but we got to get used to this new reality now, which is that the Trump administration is going to be different from the norm. It won. We wouldn't be having these conversations right now if Vice President Harris had won the election. We'd be talking about, most likely, there would be some lightning rod nominees, because there always are, but there would be greater qualification, I'm guessing, because even in Republican administrations past, there always seems to be a qualification for these people, with the exception of Trump.
We had a couple of comments that I wanted to put toward you, and it's about what you were just mentioning about whether making an oath to a wife matters. And here's the first one. Judy says, in my opinion, whether Hegseth cheated on his wife should not affect his ability to be the Secretary of Defense. However, if he committed crimes like sexual assault, that changes the situation. And then Kurt writes, any man who would break his oath to his wife would have no compunction breaking his oath to the United States Constitution. So I think it's an interesting debate, and those two comments really go well together, because what is right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's your own conscience. I agree with, was it Judy and Kurt? I agree with Judy more. I think that private lives, as long as they're legal and as long as there is not violence and assault, and most people who cheat on their wives I'm guessing, are not also people, or husbands are not also people who have physically abused them, who have been, implicated in rape. I just don't think that's the case.
Sure.
So if we took all of the people who broke the laws of fidelity or the rules of fidelity in marriage, I don't think there'd be a lot of people who are eligible necessarily, or a lot of the people would be looked at as ineligible, is a better way to put it. A lot of people who've already served. It doesn't excuse it. And I don't think that if you break an oath in marriage, it means you're going to break an oath to the country. But it sure does make you more suspect of that, right? I mean, if you took a vow and you broke a vow, and now you're going to take another one. Last vow you took, you broke. So what does that mean here?
Right.
And so I think there's validity to both what Judy and Kurt are saying, and I'm not saying that to be diplomatic. I can see how those are 2 points of view. I tend to think that that they are very different in a way. A vow to uphold the laws of the United States, and to, bear full allegiance to the country is a little different. But again, that doesn't make me right. That's just my filter. And here's Luis who's saying we $4.99. Thank you very much for that. We fully endorse Pete Hegseth's nomination. Spiritedly yours, Jack Daniels or Jay Daniels, Jay Walker. Oregon. Yeah, and there, Pete Hegseth has said in these hearings as well that if he is, if he's confirmed and he takes the oath, he will not drink. He will not let a sip of alcohol pass his lips. And then one of the senators asked, if you do, does that disqualify you? Would you resign if you then started drinking? And he just repeated his vow not to drink anymore. John Tower, who was nominated for the same position in the 80s by, I guess it was Ronald Reagan, but it might have been George H.W. Bush, said that he would not drink. He was ultimately not confirmed because of the drinking and how it interfered with his life. Pete Hegseth has been known as someone who drinks, who has shown up intoxicated accordingly to Fox News. He said these are anonymous allegations, but again, the committee has it as not being anonymous. And there are double standards that happen. I mean, senators who say that they wouldn't vote for someone who's drinking. Does that mean that they don't drink? I don't know. But the point is this man, Pete Hegseth, the best choice to be Secretary of Defense? Is he a qualified choice? Is someone with these allegations of sexual assault, qualified to be the Secretary of Defense of the armed forces where sexual assault is not tolerated, right? I mean, that is grounds for being court-martialed, or I shouldn't say that because I don't know, but whatever the term is, to be discharged. And if you are discharged dishonorably for that, certainly you want the person who is running that department to at least live by those standards. And it is not clear that Pete Hegseth has lived by those standards. To some, it's clear that he has not. But at the very least, it's not clear that he has. And when you see somebody like, I think somebody was saying sellout in here about Joni Ernst, and she's, Barbara says she's a surviving victim, as we talked about before, Kim. I had forgotten that, but that's true. And so it's truthfully shocking to a lot of people that someone like Joni Ernst, you see Joni Ernst, a survivor of sexual assault from her single college days, spousal abuse and harassment in the military. She's a surviving victim. And you would think if anybody would vote against Pete Hegseth, it would be Joni Ernst. Republican or Democrat, the fact that she's a Republican, the fact that she was threatened with a primary were she not to support Hegseth or any of the other nominees, and she is now seeming to hedge toward at least supporting Hegseth, makes you think that the ship has sailed here. And I'm not trying to influence our poll, which by the way is still up. But this is a very, very difficult situation for Democrats fighting against Hegseth when Joni Ernst seems to be going in the direction of her Republican colleagues. It gives a pass to people like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, perhaps Shelley Moore Capito, or Deb Fisher, if any of them were even poised to vote against Hegseth. So it also gives a pass to women who want to vote against him, knowing he'll get confirmed anyway, because Joni Ernst is going to support him. So you can get cover if you're Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins, who says she's going to run again in 2026. So I think that there's that you have to read these tea leaves, and the tea leaves don't read well for people who are opposed to Pete Hegseth.
Interestingly, Jay Kotche writes, a conviction under Article 134 for extramarital sexual conduct carries a severe maximum penalty. It's the most serious discharge type, making a permanent negative end or marking a permanent negative end to your military career. Is that what happened? I don't think Hegseth was discharged in that fashion.
I don't think so. But again, what he brings up, what Jay Kotche, if I don't have it on my screen anymore, what he brings up is true. Kotche is true. It speaks to the fact that whether or not this is the case, these are allegations according to Hegseth and his people, whether it's the case or not. Is he the best person to be overseeing a military where that is one of the rules? I would argue no. And I think a lot of people would argue no. I mean, where do we hold these standards? There are standards in the military, as we just read, if that's in fact true, that are far greater than the standards we hold ourselves to in everyday civilian life in America. And, he's unable to say, even in those hypotheticals, whether or not that would disqualify him. To me, that's enough said. In a hypothetical, yes, he said, oh, that's a hypothetical. That's a hypothetical. That's why we ask hypotheticals, right? We ask hypotheticals to prove a point. And the hypothetical here would be, if X, then would you resign your position? That's a hypothetical. That's what we're doing here. We're asking hypotheticals. And as a military leader, a lot of it is hypothesis. A lot of military planning is hypothesis. A lot of positioning, a lot of readiness. It's all hypothetical, right? If this were to happen, what would we do? Tim Kaine is asking the very same questions, not about military strategy, but about life and about his outlook on his behavior and all of that. So it's very, very, very plain to see that this is someone who is avoiding answering questions because he doesn't want to implicate himself in any way, because he also knows what these senators have. If he were to say, yes, it would disqualify you, well, then Tim Kaine comes out the next day and says, well, you did do this, and you did say this, and even you said you're disqualified because of this. And so it becomes very complicated. He's also hiding behind the shield of Jesus Christ in these hearings, and that is something that Republicans take kindly to.
Well, it's the most sacrilegious thing of all. How you could hide all these slimy, dirty things behind religion. I don't know. He just doesn't come off well, I think, in these hearings. And the sad part, Michael Schur, is that it just won't matter. How he comes off, how gross, slimy, and creepy he presents himself has nothing to do with the fact that he's going to slide right on in and lead the nation's military. And that's really a disappointment.
It is totally a disappointment. It is a disappointment because a U.S. president nominated him. Yes. And that U.S. president is going to be front and center for the next 4 years. And the enablers that are voting to send Hegseth to defense are still kneeling at the temple of Donald Trump. And until that stops, and I predict it will, not en masse, but I predict it will in more than just a trickle, as it has over time, because those people who went against him, it was not a successful formula for them. But Donald Trump takes the oath of office in 6 days, and the moment he says, so help me God, he's a lame duck president. And different things happen to lame duck presidents. It just takes a little while.
Well, I sure hope that's the case. Yikes.
Yeah.
We got a contribution from Trevor, who says, Michael Schur, glad you're back on the show. That guy, Mark Tomlinson or whatever, was a fairly adequate fill-in host, though.
I love it. Yeah, thanks, Trevor. It's great to be here. I love, Mark and I talked a lot after I did the shows that week. And, I talked to him about how grateful I was that he entrusted me with doing this. But again, there are many other people who could do it. And I didn't have to go through confirmation hearings. But also, and I'm not saying this just because that's who's in the comments and that's who's watching, but the audience is very engaged and they're very on top of it, and their opinions, I think 99% well-founded. Even ones I disagree with are sound, and that's pretty rare. You don't see that in a lot of the things I do when I go on, for example, different television shows or other streamers. You don't get that same sense of kind of calm approach to things that I found on this show, and even when you're angry about things, the reasoning and what brought you to that. So Mark and I talked a lot about the audience, and we talked a little bit about a mug, but I didn't get the mug.
No.
I got the audience. I still haven't gotten a mug. People have actually written to me on Twitter, did you get the mug? Did you get the mug? No. I think that we have a poll for later in the week as to whether or not I should get a mug, and we can send those results to Mark and see.
I'm seeing a lot of comments for your 47 seconds of hockey news, so that's nice.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to 47 seconds. We have plenty of time. We've got guests today too. We have David Cay Johnston. We have Mr. Jefferson coming. I went to
Jefferson Graham.
Yes, yeah. But I went to the University of Virginia, and there's this reverence for Thomas Jefferson. He's Mr. Jefferson. He's not Jefferson. Yeah. We have Jefferson Graham here to talk about tech, which is more intimidating to me than anything in the world. So it's great that we'll be able to talk about that, and so I think we should also just sort of square the circle on the fires as well, since I am just a few miles from where they did so much of their damage, and I know so many people, or several people anyway, who lost everything, but they have their lives. And obviously it's easy to say, oh, but that's the most important thing. It is the most important thing, but it's so devastating that it's going to take all of them a long time to get their lives back in order. Right now, just sort of updating things, 60 square miles have burned in these fires. 60 square miles, that's a ton of space. It's the most expensive disaster. They're saying it's a $200 billion repair, and those are early estimates. And then you see the politicization of it right now. There are Republicans in Congress, and we'll get into this in a little bit, who are trying to tie California relief to raising the debt limit. And so everything comes with politics. And understand, too, that red states who have red senators and red representatives, for the most part, are all the ones that are trying to say, let's not bail out California, or let's make them pay for it if they're going to do it, are the ones that are in hurricane zones, or the ones who are in tornado zones. I was in James Comer's district. He's a chairman of the oversight committee in the U.S. House. He's a Republican from Kentucky. I was in his district covering a tornado, and he was saying, please, Biden administration, give us money. We need money. We need money. And the Biden administration gave money, and FEMA came in, and it was a massive disaster in Kentucky that pales in comparison to what happened here. But it's not about comparing them. It's about saying the government is there to take care of the people who are hit by natural disasters, and we don't have to do politics with it. Yet the Republicans are doing that. We'll talk to David Cay Johnston about that too, I hope.
Has there ever been a time in history where a natural disaster like this was kind of dangled, like the funding, the help from the government was dangled in front of you like a carrot? If you jump high enough, you get the help?
Only in California, and only like at the campfire, at the fire in Northern California, they were doing the same things. And these are people, I mean, I can't remember which representative it was, but there was an explosion of a gas tank that killed many people and did massive damage to a town in Texas, somewhere between Waco and Dallas. And the representative's name isn't coming to mind right now, but he was saying how much he wanted money, yet he was someone who voted against Hurricane Sandy funding. And Hurricane Sandy was the prime example of that, where people tried to politicize that. Well, we're not going to give money to New Jersey and New York because it's just too much money and their preparedness wasn't what it should have been, et cetera, but we're going to tie that to other things. But when it happens in Louisiana, or it happens in Florida or Alabama, it happens in Oklahoma, they're the first people going to the government saying, we need this money. When Katrina happened, they wanted money, they got money. When hurricanes in Florida happened, DeSantis, who rails against the Biden administration, says, oh, but wait, we really need help down here. And that's what happens. And so there isn't, it is the most politically naked behavior that there is, because they only do it when it affects blue states. The Democrats don't do it in the same way to Republicans requesting money.
I have a story that's applicable to what you're talking about, and it's about Alabama's Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville, who says the state of California does not deserve money from the federal government to help with recovery efforts from devastating wildfires. He said during an online interview on Monday, he blasted Democratic leaders in California for failing to do maintenance on brush and trees to adequately fund dams and stormwater infrastructure. He insists California does not deserve money to help with wildfires unless they show that they're going to change their ways.
Yeah, and when Barack Obama was president, there was an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and he was a coach at Auburn coaching football. And when there was severe weather that caused over 200 deaths in 2011, Barack Obama was president, to over 200 deaths in Alabama in 2011. I think it was 11, maybe 12. I'm sure no one in Alabama asked the federal government for aid, and I'm sure that had strings been attached, they would have been absolutely fine with that. No, you can look at California, you can say they have to adequately clear brush. Since October 1st, there's been 1/10 of an inch of rain. Their normal average is over 4 inches of rain in that time period. It has been dry, and Tommy Tuberville and his friends want to discount everything having to do with climate relief, with a Green New Deal, with all of that. And so you can blame California, but as the weather changes, California and everybody else need to adjust to climate change. And Tuberville doesn't think that existed. So you can start right there with Tommy Tuberville and dismiss what he's saying. He won an election against Doug Jones because he's from Alabama, but he is, in the annals of qualified people to be U.S. senators, I would not put him on page one.
No.
Kim, I'm guessing we need to sell coffee from Coachella Valley, and I think you have some news to do. Is that right?
Yeah, you want me to do some news for you?
Yeah, I think that says the fill-in host.
Well, we also have David Cay Johnston sitting in the waiting room, so you can get right to him if you'd like.
Oh, we do. So why don't we get to David Cay Johnston, dispatched with your news?
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let David Cay Johnston make us all smarter, as he's very good at doing. Without further hemming and hawing, David, welcome to the Mark Thompson Show.
Well, good to be with you again as a fill-in host.
Yeah, I like it. I'm an interim coach, and at the end of the season, they all get fired. I've been noticing and following the NFL, but we'll stick it out as long as we can. So, David, there's so much to discuss, and in keeping with the model, let's continue this conversation, because I guess you were probably listening to a little bit of it, and the way that this kind of double standard on how politics gets into the conversation when we're talking about disaster relief. For just perspective, David, I don't know if you know this. I live very, very close to where these fires are in the Palisades. I'm in Palisades a lot. My son went to school there. His school burnt down. So he wasn't there. He's gone. He's graduated. But the point is that I have proximity to a disaster like I've never had before, and to hear this, it pierces even worse when you hear the Tommy Tubervilles and the Republicans talk about it in this way.
Well, especially given that he's from a welfare state. California sends far more money to Washington than it gets back in government services and contracts, whereas Alabama is a welfare state. So that's particularly galling. But this is a new development that started with Donald Trump. We'll provide money to our friends and not to our enemies, and is in sharp contrast to Joe Biden saying, I'm the president of all the people. And in fact, more money from the Inflation Reduction Act went to red states than blue, as absolute proof of that. And Biden, in, I think, a mistake in my view, would allow senators and congresspeople who voted against funding to come to the ceremonial first shovel with President Biden. And they would talk about, oh, well, I brought all this money to my constituents, which was just a complete lie. They didn't want to bring it at all. And this is not the first time we've seen that, however good he may have been as a football coach, Tommy Tuberville doesn't know anything. I mean, in that regard, he's very much like Donald Trump. His ignorance is unmeasurable. It is so large. It's like the known universe. You just can't conceive of anything that big.
Yeah, Howell Heflin, who was a senator from Alabama for many, many years, he sort of bridged that the new. I mean, he was there for such a long time. He was a Supreme Court judge there, but he bridged an era of Democratic politics from the old South to the new South, and then, of course, no Democrat could be elected. He said, once I remember somebody asked him if there's any way that he could lose. And he said, well, only if the coach of Alabama is running against me. Well, Tuberville was the coach of Auburn, and that may be the only way that he could have beaten even Doug Jones, who had only beaten Roy Moore by just a very little bit. And I think talking about Doug Jones is a good segue into talking now about, before we leave storms, what about Sandy? To me, you said it started more recently under Trump, but I feel like it started during Hurricane Sandy relief. Am I mistaken for thinking that way?
Well, every big disaster we've had back at least to the hurricane that hit New Orleans in August of 2005, we've seen this rising aspect, but it comes from the Republicans. I have not heard any significant Democrat say, oh, we should check your political views before we decide if you get money from the federal government. Now, there's a reasonable argument to be made, should the government at all be in the business of helping after natural disasters? I think the answer to that should be, yes, of course we will do that. That's one of the things a country does to take care of its citizens. But if you want to debate that, let's have a debate about that, but certainly not, well, you didn't vote for our party, so no money for you. I'm reminded here of a social event that I went to once, and one of my children, who was then, I think, 9 years old, went and got a plate and got in line to eat after the event, and the plate was snatched away from her by the hostess, who said, this is only for our side of the family. I mean, who does that?
Wow.
And now we're seeing people like this in public life. They don't have any regard for Americans. And you will see steadily in Donald Trump's comments and in comments of various people on Fox that you're either with Donald Trump or you're not worthy.
Yeah.
And I was watching earlier today parts of the confirmation hearing for Pete Hegseth. And Richard Blumenthal, the former Attorney General of Connecticut, very smart prosecutor, said, I would support you to be the Pentagon spokesman, but you're not qualified to be head of the Defense Department, which prompted Senator Mullen from Oklahoma to then assert that nobody who was a senator was qualified to hold any appointed position. They just got lucky and got elected, including himself. But we're getting into this absurd realm instead of dealing with realities. Hegseth was asked by one of the women senators, I believe Jean Shaheen from New Hampshire, but I may be wrong. There is a law that says that women must be treated equally in the military. They must be trained for combat. We have women, been through Ranger School and SEAL School, et cetera. And will you obey the law and see to it? And remember, Hegseth says he doesn't want any women in combat. So what does Hegseth say as an answer? Well, I will absolutely look into that, consistent with the positions of America First and the policies of the incoming president, which is his way of saying, of course, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
I'm going to eliminate women. And this is a test by Donald Trump of how many Republicans will risk being voted out of office by rejecting a manifestly unqualified candidate, who, by the way, also took his hearing as an opportunity to say, this is all a coordinated smear campaign by lefty media, ignoring, a police report. He wouldn't even agree to a further FBI inquiry questioning his accountants, his ex-wives, other people. Well, I'm sorry, if all of this is untrue, you didn't rape or try to rape any women, why would you object to the FBI looking into this? Right. I'm perfectly happy to have somebody investigate all the rape cases involving me, because there aren't any.
Right. I think, just the fact that now that people are talking about how the FBI didn't do a good enough investigation into this makes it plain. And I think that Tim Kaine at least insinuated the same, that there's stuff out there that the Senate is not sharing, that we know,
right,
that Hegseth himself obviously knows, and the threat of that being released doesn't seem to be moving.
And remember, this is what happened in the Brett Kavanaugh hearing.
Yeah,
we had question. Susan, I think her name was Susan Ford, come forward and tell about Brett Kavanaugh assaulting her when they were in high school. Well, I'm willing to pass over something in high school or college if it was a stupid thing you did when you were young. But it's been credibly reported that there were thousands of tips from women, their friends, their spouses about other assault, all of which the Trump administration kept from going to the Senate. In this case, the background report on Pete Hegseth has been available, but they won't let the Democrats see it. That's not how the Constitution envisions how things function. It is one of the many signs that we are heading towards the end of our democracy. If Trump has the skill, and I'm not sure he does, to pull it off to become America's dictator, Emperor Donald.
Yeah. And again, this is advise and consent. You hear about it all the time. This committee is meant to do all the work they can in the old construct of how this came about, and then report their findings before C-SPAN existed and we could all sit and watch it, report their findings to the whole Senate. It's changed a lot since C-SPAN. I think C-SPAN's a great thing. I think cameras in government have been great, but there are they don't come without deficits. And I think this is a deficit, this grandstanding, this, if this was happening in a room without cameras, you would be getting different questions, you'd be getting different answers, and you would also have, I think, a little bit more courage from senators.
Well, and also, Mike, I think it's important to keep in mind that this isn't unique to politicians who preen in front of the cameras. Right. I've written pieces about journalists who do this. Back during the invasion of Iraq, there were daily briefings by Donald Regan when he was the Donald Regan, who was the defense secretary.
Regan was
Rumsfeld. Donald Rumsfeld.
Donald Rumsfeld.
I'm sorry, Donald Rumsfeld.
Regan was Reagan.
This was Donald Rumsfeld when he was defense secretary. And there was a reporter who asked this question, and he backs into it, and then he tells you how much he knows, and then how smart he is, and brings up something else that's marginally relevant. And finally, he gets to the question, and Donald Rumsfeld says, "That is the worst," he may have even said, "stupidest question I've ever heard, and it was badly asked." And I remember flying out of my chair and going, yes, you just ask the question, get to the point. Don't offer 15 off-ramps for the person to not answer your question. That's why it's
nobody needs
very important.
Your own bona fides for asking the question. You're the reporter asking the question. Yeah.
Right. And it goes to how much we are worse off for not having Katie Porter in the Senate. I mean, Adam Schiff's going to be a great senator, but she would have been a really good inquisitor. And Al Franken, who was driven out by Kirsten Gillibrand, one of my senators in New York, over nonsense. The people who are in comedy engage in all sorts of ridiculous play as part of what they do. And I have a daughter who was part of the stand-up brigade, or whatever it's called, of people who do comedy on stage in New York, and I went to a sort of rehearsal practice, try things out once. And as her father, I was uncomfortable. Okay. But I also understood this is how you come up with skits and things. You try things, you do silly things, you don't have any limits, and then you decide what's acceptable to an audience. And we instead are getting a lot of questions asked by senators that are designed either to take away from any serious discussion of the issues, or that don't press and say, that's not an answer, sir. And that's where Katie Porter and Al Franken were superb. They really knew how to ask the killer question.
Yeah, no, there's no question. And I would say, I mean, to a lesser extent, I wouldn't put her in the same. I think Vice President Harris, when she was in the Senate, was very, very good at asking questions when she was a senator.
She was. I agree with you. She was an excellent. She did an excellent job asking questions when she was a senator.
Yeah, but again, it is now it's now a show. These confirmation hearings are shows. They are drawing lines, and I think that the people that are not qualified generally get out before they make it to the Senate floor, and that's not how it always used to be. And we'll see where these go. Does this mean that Hegseth is confirmed? No, but I think if you don't have Joni Ernst, as we said, the math becomes much more difficult for those who don't want him to be secretary. I want to talk to you, David, about news that was made yesterday when Jack Smith released part of his report. I want to know a little bit about why it's important that we know these things. And whether or not it's just so damn frustrating that we'd rather not know. And we, does it put an exclamation point on our frustration with Merrick Garland?
Well, Merrick Garland, like Robert Mueller, proved to be a very unfortunate choice in the sense that, while fully qualified, they were both such Boy Scouts that they didn't understand they were dealing with someone who's the exact opposite of that. And they didn't adjust to address that. And delay after delay after delay, once the case was brought against Trump, the two cases by the federal government, but those should have been brought right away. I mean, on January 21st, 4 years ago, Merrick Garland should have said, here, I need a team of people to investigate Donald Trump, and I want to hear back in 60 days, we can or can't charge him. And it's unfortunate what happened. I think that in the one case where Trump was convicted, the New York hush money case, and therefore manipulation of the election, that it's unfortunate that Judge Marchand didn't handle the hearing where he sentenced Trump differently. I understand why he said, I'm not going to impose a penalty, at least in terms of probation or incarceration, because Trump's about to take office. But he could have fined him. But more importantly, he could have said, given the unusual circumstances of this case, I think it's important to know what I would have done but for the Supreme Court decision. And then, if he was going to give him prison time, he should have said so. Now, he would be severely criticized for that. The Trump people would, without a doubt, have tried to get him removed from the bench if he did that, because it doesn't conform with judicial norms. But the obvious offense of that would be, this is a very unusual circumstance, and we're going to regret that Donald Trump did not get what he deserved, which was conviction and imprisonment for the crimes he's been committing his whole life, but in particular, the two federal cases, the Georgia case that's still on hold, and the New York case.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I was thinking, I was sort of segueing from Tuberville to Doug Jones, and Doug Jones was he was a senator there for just a moment after Jeff Sessions had been put in cabinet by Donald Trump. Doug Jones was former U.S. attorney, prosecuted the Alabama bombing, and he seemed like somebody who was about to be the Attorney General, save for the fact that Joe Biden promised that he would nominate an African-American woman to the Supreme Court, had to sort of put her on a court, vacate a seat, and elevated Merrick Garland so that Ketanji Brown Jackson could take that seat on the circuit court. So what I think is that if Doug Jones had been there, and we can think this as much as we want, it doesn't matter, but there are prosecutors who could have been in the position of Attorney General, who would have gone after Donald Trump much harder and maybe more quickly and less deliberately, and given a better, I guess, a better outcome to some of these cases more quickly.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's more than reasonable to criticize Garland for just being too formal and cautious.
Yeah.
He's not a bad guy. He's a very good guy. He was an excellent judge. I've read some of his opinions. They're solidly reasoned work on complex issues. Yeah. But he didn't understand who he was dealing with, which is the third generation head of a 4-generation crime family, not a crime family like the mafia where they kill people and break legs, but a white collar crime family that steal with broken promises, ink pens, and lawyers. And he just didn't understand who he was dealing with and didn't apparently have the resolve to push this much earlier. And Jack Smith made one big mistake. They made a decision to file the documents case in Florida. The Constitution says that you will be prosecuted in the district, there are 90 judicial districts in the country, in the district where your crime occurred. Well, the crime wasn't depositing the documents in Florida. The crime was taking them from Washington, D.C., and then there were subsequent crimes where Trump and his lawyers knowingly lied and denied and hid documents. Those are additional charges. They could have brought a third case, or they could have incorporated them in the D.C. case. They apparently were concerned that the Supreme Court would delay the proceedings while Trump argued, if you're going to charge me, you have to do it in Florida. And I think that was, in retrospect, a huge mistake, especially given that Trump got Judge Cannon, a highly likely nominee for the next Supreme Court opening, even though she's demonstrated her utter lack of fitness for that position. So do you want to talk at all about the fires, by the way?
Yeah, we're going to get to fires. There was some breaking news yesterday with Jack Smith. I'm going to get to the fires. I want to ask one follow-up to what you just said. Yeah. Was there anything to do you think, with making whatever happened pardon-proof and also an assumption that Trump could never be elected again?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, I haven't thought about the pardon-proof side of this. Had Trump been convicted in any of these cases, he wouldn't be in the White House. We would not be facing the disaster we're about to face. I don't think there's any question about that. And the argument that Trump makes that, they were prosecuting me so I wouldn't be in the White House again, well, let's assume that's true. What does that have to do with anything? If you're a criminal, if you have stolen national security secrets, not a couple of documents for which, people have gone to jail over taking home one document overnight and returning it, but taking them wholesale and then revealing secrets to people. So what? That's the real issue, that you behaved in a way disloyal to the U.S. And I think it's unfortunate that none of the Democrats were willing to challenge Trump's running for president on the grounds that he is an insurrectionist and is barred under the 14th Amendment's third clause, which says anyone who gave aid or comfort to an insurrection, you don't have to be an insurrectionist, gave aid or comfort to an insurrection, is ineligible to hold any government office.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. I'm glad. I just wanted to ask that to you. And yes, we can come back here to the Golden State and talk about fires. Did you want to talk about how politicized they've become, or about what the financial impact to the state and country is, or both?
Well, I want to give a little political context to this. I lived in LA for almost 10 of the 12 years I worked for the Los Angeles Times. I was up in San Francisco, the other part. In 1980, John Gerard, the fire chief of LA, gave a talk in which he said that the city did not have adequate fire trucks and equipment for a conflagration He warned that a fire that started in the foothills could sweep down into the flat areas, both on the ocean side of the city and in the San Fernando Valley, and that they would probably, in such a circumstance, be required to use dynamite to blow up blocks of houses to create a fire break. That story didn't appear in the LA Times because the editor in question said that it was alarmist and just an effort to get more money for his budget. Well, look what happened. I mean, it took 45 years, but exactly what he worried about happened. And it wasn't like nobody knew this would happen. In 1955, when I was 6 years old, I lived on my grandmother's orange ranch in Orange at the time. I watched the live broadcast by the legendary TV reporter Cleet Roberts of the Bel Air fire and the houses that were burned. And the first time I learned about cedar shake roofs. Grandma, what's a cedar shake roof and why these contribute to fires? And they're still all over LA. They're now supposedly treated with fire retardants, but nonetheless, they're wood. Yeah. So this issue of underfunding the fire department is an old issue. It is not a new issue. When Jennifer and I lived on Mount Washington, we had a shack. It's all it was. But it was on the top of Mount Washington, which is the road to the left if you're going up the Pasadena Freeway from downtown to Pasadena. It's the mountain on the left where the Southwest Museum is. We practiced escape routes if there was a fire, because it's a very steep, it's 800 feet above sea level, and a fire at the bottom could race up to the top literally in a couple of minutes. And so people are aware there's this fire danger. There's not a lot to be done about that except for building houses that are not intended to burn. And you'll see in the photographs that there are houses that did not burn because they had zero escaping. Instead of various things in the yard, they had rocks and rock gardens, and plants were kept at a certain distance. There are stands of trees still up in Pacific Palisades that weren't burned by the fire, where there are buildings that are gone. There's a lot that could have been done to fund firefighting, to put underground reservoirs aside. The system isn't designed, to draw all the water needed to fight all these fires. So, of course, water pressure falls and reservoirs go dry. But there could have been more done. But you know what? The taxpayers of LA and California, they didn't want to do that. They wanted lower taxes. They didn't want to spend money on a speculative fire that might come someday. And that's part of the core of this. We're not prepared for things. And now that we have climate change, now we have the Chinese hoax, right. According to Donald Trump, we're seeing these things come home to roost. And this is not over. There will be next year and the year after that. And what will follow the fires we have right now? They're going to be mudslides, because the basins below the mountains, they're basically debris fields, those huge boulders you can go out and see northwest of downtown. Those are come down from the mountains from past storms. And so we're going to have mudslides. We're going to find out that a lot of people didn't update their insurance. When we had the fires in Ladera Heights, which was a mostly black neighborhood off Crenshaw Boulevard, a number of the owners up there had not updated their insurance from even the 1950s, if I recall, and therefore insurance companies didn't have to pay them. There's a law that, if you don't have proper insurance, I insure my house to the maximum extent State Farm will allow me, and I pay for what's called code insurance. The building codes have changed, and code upgrades and rebuild. And if I didn't do that, I would save $90 a year. Doesn't make sense, people doing dumb things like that. So you're going to see it's going to be very difficult to get fire insurance in California. It's not going to be. You mentioned
State Farm. They're not even in California. They said we're not writing any more policies in California at all. Before
and these problems are not limited to Southern California. I grew up in Santa Cruz. I was sure during the fire in 20 or 21 that my house I used to own in the Bonnie Doon area up in the Redwood Forest was going to be gone. The fire stopped at the hill just before it got to the house. But back then, the authorities warned that a fire from up in the Bonnie Doon Hills, that's where the University of California, Berkeley is, University of California, Santa Cruz is, could sweep down into the city and burn all the way to the ocean. Has any fundamental reform taken place since then? No, because human beings aren't very good at, oh, that might happen in the future, but it's not affecting what I'm doing today, and I don't want to pay any more taxes. So, we need to look at ourselves about things like this, and we need to think smarter, and we need to listen to the people like the late Fire Chief John Gerard when they warn us that this is what the engineering tells us, this is what the science tells us.
Right.
And as a general rule, we're not doing that.
And whoever the editor was, I love the criticism that the fire chief was being alarmist. Well, if anybody has a right to be alarmist. They're called fire alarm.
It's a fire chief.
Yeah, it's a fire chief, right? I mean, so.
And Michael, the death rates from fires in the U.S. compared to the late 19th century, so 125 years ago, are vastly lower today. They're vastly lower than they were 100 years ago because we did listen to fire engineering. So buildings have sprinklers in them. New York City, famously, the city council agreed to give all sorts of waivers for buildings that don't have sprinklers in them. If you go in Manhattan, up Amsterdam, or one of the broad roads that runs the length of the island, you will see all of these 4, 5, 6, 7-story apartment buildings. If you look very carefully, you will notice that the outdoor fire escapes often run down in front of specific apartments instead of the window in the hallway facing the street. And what that means is that there's a fire in that building and you're on the X floor, and the person whose apartment is where the escape is, and they're gone, you're going to die in that fire. Right. Because they didn't put them in front of the big windows, they put them next to somebody's apartment. Right. This is idiocy of the first order, and it's not like we don't know what to do here. But the notion that we shouldn't help Californians because, as Tommy Tuberville said, well, it's not all Californians, it's just those liberals who voted for these idiots. That's his words, not mine. Yeah. That's offensive, and hopefully it won't become policy, but I'm very concerned it may well become policy under this administration.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would put nothing past this administration, and to talk about one other thing with the fires. In the 1980s, there was this movement, the Let Malibu Burn movement, which I would guess that you remember. But the premise being that nature does this. Fires start, they burn brush, and then brush grows again. We're just living there now, and we are victims to that. So when a house burns down, don't allow it to be rebuilt in that area, because this is just going to keep happening over and over again.
Well, indeed, we've known widely, at least since the mid-'70s, the LA Times carried a big story by one of my colleagues in the mid-'70s about fire as a natural part of the Western United States. The indigenous peoples, long before Europeans came, used to set fires on purpose because they led to new growth. They led to certain kinds of seeds not opening. They'd lay there on the ground for decades, and then when a fire came, they would pop open and they would begin to repopulate. So we're not respecting this sort of natural condition of the environment. You can still build in areas like that, but if you do so, you have to do it with a thought to, well, what happens when there is a fire? How do we minimize the risk of a fire? And so you don't want to build wood frame houses. You don't want to have roofs that are other than metal or Spanish tile, things like that. You want to keep shrubbery at a distance, and you want to have plans to, if necessary, wet that property. You have a swimming pool, have a system. All of that costs money to do, but you have to adapt to the environment or suffer the consequences of not adapting.
It's very true. David Cay Johnston, obviously I could sit here and talk to you all day, but you can't do that, and I can't do that. We have another guest, and we have news, and we have Pete Hegseth, and so there's a lot to cover. It's one of the privileges of being able to guest host this is to visit with you and on Tuesday. So I'll always make sure I can do it Tuesday when Mark asks.
Nice to be with you, Michael. Have a wonderful week. Take care.
You too. David Cay Johnston, man, dude is good. Kim, I know that I'm going to ask you to be the cruise director here. Are we going to take the boat into the news now and talk about that? I don't want to step on anyone's toes.
I would, but then I hate to keep Jefferson Graham waiting. How about this? Why don't we go to Jefferson Graham and then we'll do some news right after Jefferson?
I thought Jefferson was going to be here later, but that's because I'm not technologically savvy. So maybe
you're right. It's just that I hate to keep him waiting.
Okay, I see. Oh, I see. So when are we expecting him? We're expecting him in like 15 minutes, right?
He's right. He's here.
He's here. That's what I mean. Oh yeah, I don't want to keep him waiting either. That's what I thought. I thought he was just coming later. So
no, he's arrived.
So, like I said earlier, UVA, Mr. Jefferson was the most revered person when I was in school there. So, with that, I introduce Mr. Jefferson Graham to talk to us about tech stuff and make me less intimidated to have these conversations. Jefferson, it's good to be back on the show, but good to be here and talking to you. And look at that. Look who didn't press the mute button. Or look who pressed the mute button.
Jefferson, we got no audio from you. We're getting no audio.
See? This is perfect.
This is live, everybody.
This is live. But it's great, too, that my intimidation about things technological, now we see. Yeah, here we are.
Now we're all watching.
This is great.
What's going to happen next? Maybe we should do a little news and come back.
Okay.
He'll be back in 2.
5. Okay.
15. Yep. All right. He's coming back. Right. Okay. So
news it is.
News it is, Kim. Go do the news. Your sound is perfect.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Are we doing news? Okay. Give me a second here.
Mm-hmm.
There we
we'll
go.
get it together over here.
Hey, look at that.
Hey, there she is. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. As Michael Schur mentioned earlier, Southern California officials are saying the next 24 hours will be very dangerous because of these high winds returning within the burn area where the wildfires are still going. The wildfires near Los Angeles have been raging for a week now. Residents being urged to stay ready to leave at a moment's notice. The National Weather Service has issued a rare, particularly dangerous situation. That's what the warning is called. It's a red flag warning for the area through tomorrow. Homeowners who lost their homes in one of the devastating wildfires in Southern California are now suing the local utility. At least 5 lawsuits have been filed against Southern California Edison, saying the company failed to take its electrical equipment offline despite the red flag warnings about damaging winds that were forthcoming. They claim the Eaton fire is the result of the Edison continually disregarding the safety of the public when it comes to their actions with their equipment. The Eaton fire has burned more than 14,000 acres since it broke out a week ago, killing 16 people and damaging or destroying more than 7,000 structures. The Altadena resident who won an historic $2 billion Powerball jackpot has lost one of his homes to wildfires. I don't know if you remember this, Michael Schur. His name was Edwin Castro. He won the largest lottery jackpot in history. In 2023, he took home close to $1 billion after taxes. He used part of his winnings to buy multi-million-dollar homes in Altadena, Malibu, and the Hollywood Hills. By last Wednesday night, 2 of his homes were in evacuation zones, and the third in Malibu had burned down in the Palisades fire. There's something to that lotto bad luck thing, the curse of the lottery winner. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I'll take the curse.
Well, you'll take your chances.
Yeah, if I had a home in the Hollywood Hills, Altadena, and Malibu from winning the lottery, and I didn't have one of those homes anymore, as long as everyone was safe.
There you go. President-elect Trump's pick for defense secretary says he respects all female service members. Army combat veteran and former Fox News host Pete Hegseth facing grilling from Democrats during his confirmation today. New York Senator Kristen Gillibrand said Hegseth has denigrated service members, while Rhode Island Senator Jack Reed said he doesn't believe Hegseth is qualified for the job. Hegseth facing allegations of sexual assault, excessive drinking, and racist and misogynistic remarks. There are details now about the Texas man who plowed a pickup truck through Bourbon Street in New Orleans, killing 14 people. Shamsud Din Jabbar was at one point apparently planning an attack during Mardi Gras. The FBI says that his internet search history included research on balcony access in the French Quarter. Former special counsel Jack Smith says the evidence he compiled against Donald Trump would have led to a conviction of the now president-elect. Overnight, the Justice Department sent Congress the final report from Smith, who resigned last week ahead of Trump's inauguration. The report covers his investigation of Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, including the buildup to the January 6th Capitol riot and the riot itself. The blame for January 6th, Smith lays directly at the feet of President-elect Trump. Princess Kate says her cancer is now in remission. The British royal making the announcement in a statement posted on social media today. The Princess of Wales said it's a relief to now be in remission and added she remains focused on recovery. Kate revealing her cancer diagnosis last year, not long after King Charles III announced his own cancer battle. In sports, DirecTV getting into the sports streaming game. The satellite TV provider unveiling the My Sports package on Tuesday. It'll feature more than 40 channels with access to live games from the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, and Michael Schur, the NHL. The company says the company says it'll cost around $70 a month. Customers will not need a dish to get the service, just a mobile device or a smart TV, all it takes. TikTok is refuting a report that it is considering selling to billionaire Elon Musk. On Monday, Bloomberg reported an option being considered included Musk's X social media platform taking over TikTok's U.S. operations. In a statement, TikTok said, "We can't be expected to comment on pure fiction." I love that Dr. Evil with the finger on his underneath his lips. The entertainment for President-elect Trump's inauguration is taking shape now. Carrie Underwood will perform during the swearing-in ceremony for Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance on Monday. Meanwhile, the Village People will be performing at one of Trump's inaugural balls. So there you go. Village People, they'll take a paycheck from anybody. It's all right. They're just glad to have the work, right? This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Oh, the fresh beans make such a difference. The source from women-owned farms, and CoachellaValleyCoffee.com is the website you want to go to. The teas are amazing, the coffees are amazing, and if you have your Mark Thompson Show coffee mug to fill up in the morning, well, even better. Sorry, Michael Schur.
Oh, God, that hurts.
I know. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And if you go to the website, click around and find something you want to try, make sure that you put the code, the super secret special Mark Thompson Show code, MARKT, MARKT. You put that in, you get 10% off your total at checkout, and that is exclusive to the Mark Thompson Show. So it's MARKT at checkout, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is the Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah, that whole mug thing, the mug thing stings. But I'm drinking today out of my this is a Joe Biden mug that was given to me. People give me mugs actually at my hotel in D.C. when I was working at covering the last inauguration. They gave us mugs celebrating the inauguration. The inaugurations are interesting. The Village People being at the inauguration. When you go, Kim, to these Trump rallies, YMCA always plays. Yeah. And these, people that are in the, farmers and military singing YMCA, and the disconnect between who the village people are, what the village is,
I know.
and a Trump rally. It was always amazing. So now that it's going full circle to the inauguration, it is both hysterical, and I guess it can't help but be a little depressing too.
Weird. It's one of those trivia questions that when asked, 10, 15 years from now, people will go, what? Really? The village people? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's true, but that one song is going to, in the Navy was their other song. These were guys who were they were everything that the Trump people want to fight against. It's crazy. Yeah. And even the people that were I think represented. It was an electrical worker and a Native American Indian and all of that and all these. It's really funny. It was never. It seemed to be lost on all these people all the time, and I always found it very curious. But no more of those rallies, I suppose, or election rallies. We can hope. Have we gotten things worked out with Mr. Jefferson Grant?
Only one way to find out.
Let's bring him in.
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson, your mic is muted, so you got to unmute it.
Yeah, we'll see if we can fix it up.
Click the little. Yeah, there we go.
Everything old is new again. Nope.
How about now? No.
No. All right. Well, I guess sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Right. So
That's the way it goes.
We'll have to.
Let's see what we can figure out here.
Gillette says, "I love village people performing. So fitting. The GOP has no clue." I don't know.
That was exactly it, Gillette. I would sit there and look at these people singing YMCA and looking at village people like, do you get this? Do you get how ironic this is? Well.
Trevor Starr making the point, hey, Jefferson Graham is the tech guy. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm in StreamYard. StreamYard, the software we're using to do all this gets a little weird sometimes and works, it doesn't work, and
yeah. Judy's
I will say there's something satisfying about someone who knows so much more about tech than you do, having the kind of thing that would happen to me all the time. And so, while I really wish we could be speaking with him, it would be nice. Can we do phone? Can we do a phoner? Can we have him phone in, or are we not there?
I would have to set up my second board. Okay, give me 1 minute. I can set it up. Give me a second.
All right. We'll take Jefferson.
Do you have my number?
For the moment.
I'll put it in private chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Michael D says it's now time for 47 seconds of hockey.
Yeah,
However,
I'll go with it.
We also have a Stories from the Sky ready to rock and roll. So you decide.
Well, for 47 seconds, we can talk about hockey. I went to a hockey game this weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada. The New York Rangers played in Las Vegas, and I went. And I went by myself. I was there was
sad.
No, it's not sad. My friends wanted to watch football, which I like doing too. But I was very, very excited to go see. And it was complete serendipity that the Rangers happened to be there. My team went to the game. It was fantastic. First of all, the Rangers won. It is loud. It is like they've really Vegas-ified the NHL, which I would think is kind of silly too. But you kind of throw all that away when you're watching in Vegas. So it was very, very exciting to see the Rangers play in Vegas and the Rangers win. And the number of Rangers fans there was astonishing. And then I found out from somebody who worked for the Golden Knights when they got there that part of their business model was a third of the building is always going to be tourists coming to Las Vegas to see their team and then spending money in Las Vegas, unlike, people going to Columbus, for example, to see the Blue Jackets. I'm probably at 44 seconds, but that played out really well, and it was really cool to see all these Ranger fans and lots of "Let's Go Rangers" chants at the game. So they won, and that was fun. 47.
How are the Sharks doing?
They're not doing great. They're probably the Sabres and Sharks probably have the worst records in the NHL right now. The Sharks, though, have shown real signs of progress, and they were not expected to be great this year anyway. And they've exceeded that, and Macklin Celebrini will probably be Rookie of the Year, and he's an exciting player to watch. So they're an exciting team to watch nonetheless, and they seem to have a lot of promise. So if I were a Sharks fan, I wouldn't worry about this season, but I'd be excited for what could come soon.
Can I throw one more sports story at you? I know we're over our 47 seconds
That's
of hockey.
fine, as long as I'm not responsible for it. Yeah, please.
This is a baseball story.
Okay.
You know the Yankees fans who interfered with the Mookie Betts hit during the World Series?
Yeah.
They have now been banned from all Major League Baseball games. The two fans who interfered with Dodgers outfielder Mookie Betts during a World Series game at Yankee Stadium have been banned from attending any games at big league ballparks. That is it. Austin Capobianco and John P. Hansen were sent a letter informing them of this decision, and it says this: on October 29th of 2024, during Game 4 of the World Series at Yankee Stadium, you interfered with play by intentionally and forcefully grabbing a player. Your conduct posed a serious risk to the health and safety of the player, went far over the line of acceptable fan behavior. Based on your conduct, Major League Baseball is banning you indefinitely from all MLB stadiums, offices, and other facilities. You are hereby banned indefinitely from attending any event sponsored by or associated with MLB. Please be advised that if you are discovered at any MLB property or event, you will be removed from the premises and subject to arrest for trespass. Boom.
Yeah, I think appropriate. I mean, they weren't just like, they were kind of almost, I wouldn't say violent, but they didn't let go. It wasn't like, oh, we almost got the ball, and they were like holding on to it. There's something sort of almost angry about it. I think, if I were them, there's a reality show of them trying to sneak into ballparks, obviously, but I think the punishment definitely fits the crime here. Somebody asked me why 47 seconds. What's with the number 47? Hegseth said he did 5 sets of 47 push-ups today. My 47 is just because I never say 45 or 60. I always pick a random number. 47 also for Pete Hegseth is that Donald Trump's going to be the 47th president, and that's why he did it. I am now changing it to 48 seconds of sports.
I like it.
All right.
Nice.
A little optimism and getting away from the number 47, which has been banned from all my ballparks now. So
noted.
48 is what we're going to do. Anyway, thanks for that. Do we have progress?
I think we do. Let's try it again.
All right, here we go, Jefferson. Well, he's muted still. You're still muted, but this, I think, is just the. All right. Oh, damn. I thought that was going to be it. And it wasn't. Kim, can you hear Jefferson?
I cannot hear Jefferson.
Well,
I sadly don't think this is going to work today. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, this is too bad.
Yeah. What a bummer. Well, we got to try it again next week, Jefferson Graham. I'm sorry. Thank you for being here. Yeah. Oh, he has a sad face. Yeah.
Right.
He's talking, but you're talking, but we can't hear you.
Right.
Oh, all right. Well, that's the way it goes sometimes. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to stories from the sky to wrap up the show, I think.
Let's do that, since we have no tech, and there's not a person out there who wants to hear anything about tech from me, right? I still hit the side of the television to make it work. All right, let's go.
We have clearance, Clarence.
Roger, Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Enough is enough! I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane! Everybody strap in!
And here we go with stories from the sky. You see it?
I do. Oh, I'm sorry. I do. I thought this was something. See, look what's happening. Everything is going wrong. Story from the sky. So this is this one is interesting. This is the leaving on the slide story, which I think is pretty great. They evacuate the Delta flights on slides in Atlanta where it's snowing. And the photo, you can see that the slides came out at, this is at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport when it was snowing, and then something went wrong on takeoff and they decided to use the slides. And they, the one passenger was saying, that the plane, while it came to a stop halfway down the runway, there was still smoke coming out, and they were standing there on the tarmac in the snow in Atlanta, having gone down the slide. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen, I guess. But just the fact that it was in snowy Atlanta, I think, gave people kind of made it even more surreal.
Yeah, that's pretty scary. Not the way you want to come off the plane. But I would rather go down the slide than have the door open in mid-flight, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely you would. And the slide story, I'm probably going to be proved wrong, but when the slide deploys and you can go down the slide, it means that everything's all right and you got to go down the slide and you'll have that story forever, as opposed to the door opening. And that takes us
did
to
not
a
immediately
different
confirm
door
the
opening
nature
story. We've seen people restrained indoors, but I think there are also stories of people having, across the history of aviation, been sucked out of planes when the door opens. This is a Boston story. A JetBlue flight in Boston was getting ready to take off, taxiing down the runway, the tarmac. You might as well say tarmac when you get a chance to say it. And they were, and then an exit door was opened by a passenger who was there, and the passenger, of course, is going to be charged. But whatever happened there, as it was going down, fortunately, it wasn't in the air, but this person took the door down. So you never know who you're sitting next to, who's getting on a flight with you. You know only that they've passed whatever sort of don't fly list exists, but you don't know what their mental state is when they get on the plane. And I think Stories from the Sky has shown that you could be sitting next to just about anybody.
Scary.
When you're on a flight. And then another story from the Sky takes us from Sydney to the Sydney Johannesburg route, is that there's now falling debris that affects the Sydney to Johannesburg route, Qantas is saying. So falling debris coming from SpaceX rocket re-entry in the southern Indian Ocean. So the hazards that are being created, not just from birds, not just from people opening doors, not just from guys putting things in their shoes to get on a flight and making us take ours off now, but the fact that there is, and this is Elon, isn't this Elon? This is something on Elon Musk. Falling debris from SpaceX rockets are now interfering with those flights.
There's a new warning. The Qantas folks say they have last-minute warnings of falling debris from SpaceX rockets re-entering Earth. So apparently, when they get the warning, they have to hold the flights. Is that the way it is?
Yeah, and the U.S. is saying that they're going to have to do a rerouting of those flights, giving advice to Qantas. And you see a Qantas, it looks like a 787 luxury liner there, or an Airbus 380 with double decker. But that they're going to have to reroute, because if this continues to happen, there's no real way to know. And you can look at that routing. If you're going from Sydney, you're going way south and around the Indian Ocean against the jet stream there to get to Johannesburg and other places in Africa. And I don't know how the rerouting works, but the fact that they would say, it's curious that they would tell Qantas that they have to deal with it, not the SpaceX people, that they have to figure something else out, right?
I guess if Elon Musk is coming, everyone just gets out of the way.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Right. Yeah. If it's Elon Musk, we're not going to change any of our rules for Elon Musk. I mean, damn it. He's the president of the United States, and he's also South African, right? Isn't he South African?
I think so.
I'm not wrong about that. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah. So, I love to fly. I love being on an airplane, but these kind of stories from the sky are kind of are always fun. And I'm sorry, Kim, because I didn't jump in. I thought that was a Kim McAllister segment.
No, that's a Michael Schur thing.
I didn't know it was a Michael Schur thing. Well, I have plenty of stories from the sky myself. So
this has been Stories from the Sky. The captain has turned off the seatbelt sign, and you are now free to move about the cabin.
Here you go.
I think we should take a look at our poll results. Is that what we do at this point?
I love it.
Right.
Yeah, let's take a look.
So we've had a poll up all day, seeing if our audience, the Mark Thompson audience, Mark Thompson Show audience, the most well-informed gathering of people on the internet, has come up with their opinion as to whether or not Pete Hegseth will be confirmed. And God love the optimism, right? How many people have voted? What's the number? Over 500? Is that right?
Yeah, 564. And we're going to keep the poll up after the show. It's going to be on the community tab. I can show you how to do it if you want, but yeah, it's on the community tab, everybody.
Okay, so Tony is telling us that this is up all day, and it will stay up there, and you can go to the community tab and you can vote, unless obviously you're Jefferson Graham, and someone will have to show you how to do that. It's a little dig at that guy. It's all friendly. So 73% of the audience thinks that he will not be confirmed. 27 say he will be confirmed. I don't know that I would recommend betting against his confirmation, but if we look at this from the audience and we have this great optimism, it bodes well for the next 4 years, because the great thing about optimism is every once in a while you're right, but you have to put up with a lot of being wrong. And bias or not, as some people may think this poll is, and it is not scientific. John Watson saying the audience might be a little biased. Yes, but your biases come into the mainstream a little bit, and then people start thinking, okay, let's make this optimism contagious, and then action can happen. That is being optimistic.
Do you think there's any reality, any world in which Pete Hegseth does not get confirmed? Is that realistic?
Here's how it could happen. It could happen by the FBI doing another look that Jack Reed, the ranking member of the committee, convinces Roger Wicker to delay this nomination, to delay the vote in committee until we have more information, and then voting on the new information. I still don't think it's going to change much. I think Joni Ernst is the key to this because of her position as a veteran, because of her position, as Kim pointed out earlier, as someone who is herself a victim of sexual assault and harassment, and being a Republican senator, and being someone who was threatened with a primary were she not to support a Trump nominee. The fact that she's voting for it gives cover to other people. And all you generally need if you're on the fence is cover from someone like Joni Ernst. So a woman who is in the United States Senate can say, well, if Joni was okay with it, then I'm okay with it. I'm voting with Joni. I'm not voting with Hegseth, something like that. Right. Unlikely, but the only ray of hope technically to me would be if Jack Reed is able to convince Roger Wicker to at least allow more investigation or more reports from the FBI, and therefore delay the vote. But that would be it.
Yeah. We'll see, I guess. When is the confirmation vote set for, do you think, or do we know?
We don't know yet. Once the hearings are over and the schedule allows, and again, it'll be up to Roger Wicker from Mississippi, who's the chairman of that committee, to determine when they're going to have the vote in committee, and then it'll go to the floor probably pretty quickly. They're going to want to have those confirmations done the same day of the inauguration, I would imagine.
Yeah.
It's
we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
The way they, yeah. And look, it's interesting. These are all interesting, and the fact that those numbers are what they are, the fact that Bob Casey and Sherrod Brown didn't win their seats and John Tester didn't hold his seat either, means that we are in this area where there is a little wiggle room for Republicans to lose a couple of votes and still confirm the president's nominees.
Cece says Politico is reporting that Republican Senator John Curtis is undecided on Hegseth.
John Curtis is a really interesting guy. He just won the seat that Mitt Romney vacated. He is I would say, I wouldn't know that he's a moderate. He's a pretty conservative guy, but he's a very reasonable and very nice man. If I asked a lot of members of the Democratic caucus and vice versa, the Republican caucus, who their favorite in the other party is, and it was more than just anecdotal, the number of people when Curtis was in the House, the number of Democrats who said that John Curtis was their favorite Republican on the other side. He's a reasonable guy, a good guy, a nice man, a religious guy. And I think that, frankly, John Curtis voting against Hegseth, were that to happen, would be interesting both for the Republicans, who know that a primary can't happen for 6 years when Donald Trump will be out of office, and would give cover to other people voting against Hegseth. So I think that there you go. That report tells you that it's not done until it's done.
Michael, sure, you did it.
We did it, yeah. I didn't do it alone. I did it with you and Tony, and with David Cay Johnston, with the efforts of Grant Jefferson. And guess what? I'm going to come back tomorrow. I'll have a different mug, and we'll have plenty to talk about, more Hegseth stuff, hopefully less fire stuff, because that'll mean that things are good, or we'll have rosy things to say about the fire. And everybody have if you're in the fire zone, be smart, be prepared, have a really safe and hopefully not very windy night.
Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Mark Thompson Show.